Hidden away in the rich part of town is my cafe. The luscious interior of the cafe, along with the relaxing jazz music that we play, make this a popular joint for students and housewives with too much free time on their hands. There's even a terrace, which is often filled with people reading books, chatting and drinking coffee, sometimes something a little stronger. It was November, and a trio of young girls entered the cafe. They'd been allowed to leave school early due to finishing their midterm exams that day. They were complaining about how they went. "Well, this is shit. Jesus, I'm gonna have to repeat a year." "Oh, come on, you couldn't have done that badly. I've never heard of a student repeating a year at 14. A fresh batch of squabbling ignited, fueled by the stress of exams and the annoying air of confidence one of the girls was giving off. She was obviously the smarter of the bunch. The nattering subsided after 10 minutes, and eventually the girls settled on a new topic of conversation, namely what schools they were planning to progress to. In the Japanese schooling system, high schools are commonly split between Chugaku, which is lower secondary, and Kou, upper secondary. What Kou you attend can greatly affect your chances of getting into a good university. Still eavesdropping in on their conversation, the two, less gifted students started teasing the smarter one, telling her how the best school in the district, the one she would likely be going to, was haunted. The rumor was a famous one. Apparently, after a student committed suicide at the school, other pupils started to die horrible deaths on the school premises. Witnesses often swore that they saw the dead student at the scene of the crimes. What a load of shit. It wasn't uncommon that people claim places where suicides occurred were haunted. In fact, in Japan, you can find an apartment at a comparatively cheaper price if misfortunes occurred there. Losing interest, I was about to turn away and tend to my duties, when I heard a shout. "Now wait just a minute," the voice said. Turning towards its source, I realized it was one of the ladies sitting on the opposite end of the cafe. The woman left her book on the table and walked over to the three young girls. Sitting down with a grunt, she scratched at her long dark hair rigorously. For that brief interval, everything in the cafe seemed to revolve around this little strange woman in a red dress. Then she opened her mouth to speak. "I am sick and tired of all of these lies about my old school being haunted. If you three would be so kind as to stop spreading such idiotic rumors, I'd be more than happy to tell you what actually happened there." I couldn't help but listen in to this whole story from behind my counter. I was just as interested in finding out the truth behind the rumors as these three young girls. The story itself wasn't about this quirky woman in the red dress though. It was about another girl that she knew at the school called Akatsuki. For the purposes of this video, I'll retell the story I overheard from Akatsuki's perspective. I have an older twin sister. I sometimes get asked things like, "Do you feel pain when your sister gets hurt? Do your parents get confused between the two of you?" Stuff like that. People seem to have this idea that twins are connected somehow on a deeper level, more so than regular siblings. But not us two. We didn't hate each other per se, but we didn't really care for one another either. We never argued, talked, or interfered with each other's affairs. We might as well have been thin air to each other. Now, my sister was much more able than me when it came to, pretty much anything. Athletics, academics. Okay, it wasn't like she was miles ahead of me, but she was always slightly better. Even when the difference was so small, from a young age, I was constantly deemed as the less able one, sometimes even the simpleton. During childhood, my arsehole parents would always say things like, "Your sister can already ride her bike, why can't you?" I probably learnt it about 20 minutes after her, but this small amount might as well have been the difference between heaven and earth. If I scored 95% on a math test, I never got a pat on my back from the teacher, or even just a reassuring, well done. No, I'd be sitting by myself with my paper, staring at my sister being championed by the class for getting 98%. But then again, I didn't really envy my sister, and she didn't brag about being better. Like I said, we were pretty much just there to each other. As implied by my past grades in school, we were both top of the league. There were times where our exam results were first and second in the whole school, so it was only natural that we ended up going to the same high school. That was the best high school in the district. Our relationship didn't change during high school. I actually enjoyed it there, but only for the first semester. Even in a school full of students who scored top grades, there were bullies and rebels. Problem was, these bullies were smart. Whenever they carried out their evil deeds, they'd make sure it wouldn't be found out by their peers or by faculty members. Even when they were found out, they generally got off the hook due to their excellent grades, because obviously, straight-A students can't be evil, can they? It started when I came back from the summer break. The bullying, that is. For some reason, they started paying attention to me at school. I don't know what I'd done, but there was nothing that I could do. During lunch or after school, they'd come to my classroom. Then they'd take me to some inconspicuous location and punch me, kick me, hit me. Like I said, they were clever. They made sure to avoid bruising my face or arms. There were 5 bullies in total. One of them was a girl with chestnut-colored hair who just watched as 3 others pummeled me senseless. She just pointed and laughed while giving the other girls orders. She was obviously the leader. There was also one other girl who came along to watch the show. My sister. It didn't make sense to me. My sister hated these types of girls just as much as I did. After ignoring each other for so long, why would she try and break me now? I'd only known the friends I'd made at the school for 3 months. As soon as they found out I was being attacked by the rogues of the school, they almost immediately stopped hanging out with me, fearful that they'd be targeted simply for associating with me. In the end, I found myself alone at school. The violence continued for months and months. They started getting more creative in the ways they'd hurt and humiliate me. The worst days were when their chestnut-haired leader was in a bad mood. Sometimes I was stripped naked and thrown into a pond. When I fell to my knees out of breath, she'd grab me by the hair and pull me up to my feet. "Not yet," Chestnut would say, and the violence would continue. All the while, my sister would be staring at me coldly, without a flicker of emotion on her face. It was as if she was staring at a rat or a cockroach. I couldn't tell what she was thinking. I thought about telling my parents, but they already had plenty to worry about with their work. Besides, they'd almost certainly take the side of their favoured daughter. My sister must have started bullying me in the first place because she knew I wouldn't talk. There was nothing I could do about the situation. If I told my teachers, there was a chance the bullying would just get worse. It was possible the teacher would think I was lying, particularly considering that the bullies were perfect students during lessons. There was absolutely nothing that I could do. Every day when I got home, I'd desperately try and clean the bloodstains off my shirt before my parents came home. I sobbed as I furiously rubbed my shirt. What had I done to deserve this? One time, while I was scrubbing, I heard my sister coming up the stairs. She must have got back from her part-time job early. I pictured her face, cold as ice, staring at me as the bullies beat me over and over again. How could it be that she was enjoying her life at school so much when I was in this state? She was part of the tennis club, had a part-time job, and lots of friends. Why did my life have to be so terrible? We were twins. I ended up hating my sister more than the other bullies, simply because she was enjoying her life so much. The violence just kept on intensifying. One time I nearly died from drowning because I was just too tired and injured to resist as they dunked my head underwater. I was tired. I could only think of one way out. I began my preparations. I wrote a note with just 4 words. Mum, Dad, I'm sorry. Slowly, step by step, I walked up the stairs of the school. Nobody was allowed to be there after 9 PM, so there were no teachers or other students around. But since I knew the school well, it wasn't difficult to break inside. I finally got to the top of the stairs. There was a metal door leading to the rooftop. I swung it wide open. It was winter at this point, and a cold breeze hit me straight away and chilled me to the bone. There was a full moon, and I could clearly see the whole rooftop area. My sister was already there, just as I had asked her to be, waiting with her back to the door. I hadn't expected her to come. She was leaning on the rails of the roof, staring down at the school grounds below. I walked towards her. I wanted to talk to you in private. I figured school would be the best place. Surprisingly, my sister replied straight away. I guess. This was the closest thing we'd had to a conversation for as long as I could remember. I stepped closer to my sister as she continued to talk. So, what did you want to talk about? Without hesitation, I threw myself at her. She had her back to me, and I caught her completely off guard. My sister flew into midair and fell downwards off the roof, down and out of sight. After seeing the suicide note that I'd placed in my sister's room, nobody suspected foul play. My sister hardly ever spoke to anyone, hardly ever laughed. It seemed perfectly plausible that she had been depressed and taken her own life. That was the beauty of my plan. Maybe with my sister gone, the 4 other bitches who'd been making my life hell would now lose interest in tormenting me. If that happened, I'd finally be able to get on with my life, go back to being a normal student again. From the time of my sister's death and her funeral, it had already been a few weeks. Feeling nervous, I stepped back into my classroom. All of my classmates ignored me, except for one girl, the leader of the bullies, the girl with chestnut hair. She smiled and winked at me. "Hey, are you alright?" she asked. I was taken aback by this display of compassion from her. Although my heart was now beating faster than it ever had, I made sure not to show it. I remained expressionless. I'm fine. It's not like I cared about her. Even though I said this, I had been feeling extremely remorseful. Yes, we were like air to each other, but she had been my twin sister. The bully nodded and smiled again. Hey, that's great. So you're gonna find a part-time job now, I guess. That was strange. Why was she talking about a part-time job all of a sudden? I couldn't hide my surprise, and she laughed when she saw my confusion. What? Did you think we'd take pity on you? If you want us to stop, you're gonna have to make a contract, just like your sister did. What the hell was she talking about? The bully looked genuinely surprised that I didn't know what she meant, that my sister had never told me what she had done. She really never told you, huh? We were bullying your sister at the start. Had nothing to do with you. We only stopped fucking with her because she agreed to pay us off. Told her we'd find a new victim instead. Oh, I still remember her face when we said we'd picked you. She told me how much I'd have to pay her and her lackeys to stop this torment. Then she patted me on the shoulder and, with another wink, said, "Good luck from today. We've already found a new target instead of you, provided you pay us on time, that is." Now I understood everything. Why the girls had started to bully me when I hadn't even met them before. Why my sister was always with them. Why my sister had been leaning against the rooftop rails with her back to me, as if she was asking me to push her. Maybe she had been in greater pain than me all along. In that moment, I blanked out. Next thing I remember, I'm being hauled into a police car by 2 armed cops. I was absolutely covered in blood. The human body is a very fragile thing. It's amazing the damage you can do to somebody with just one pen. And that was the story of Akatsuki, as told by the woman in the red dress. I couldn't help but interrupt the story as I brought her another cup of coffee. How did she know all of this? It turned out that the woman in red had been a friend of Akatsuki's, at least before she started getting bullied. To avoid unnecessary trouble, she had stopped hanging out with her, but after she found out what had happened, she felt extremely guilty. Akatsuki had been placed in a psych ward after being deemed mentally unstable. The woman in red paid her a visit and heard the whole story from Akatsuki's own mouth. The woman sipped at her coffee. Ever since that incident, all reports of bullying were taken extremely seriously, and anyone found to be a bully was punished severely. But anyway, my whole point is this. It's stupid to say that the school's haunted. With a pale face, one of the young girls pointed out that what had happened there was as good a reason as any for the school to become haunted. I had to agree. This was one of the most gruesome tales I'd ever heard in my life. But to that, the woman simply snapped. If you ask me, what Akatsuki did was perfectly natural, given what happened at least. I mean, wouldn't you have done the same in her shoes? On the way back from work, I would always pass by this creepy apartment complex. No one had been living there for years, and there were plans for the building to be demolished in a couple of months. This abandoned apartment was a hotspot for people who wanted to commit suicide. It was an isolated place with few houses nearby, and the building was high enough for the fall to be lethal. Word on the street was that this place was haunted. Us Japanese have always been a superstitious bunch, especially when it comes to suicide sites. We have more than our fair share. Since there were almost no houses nearby, there were no shops or streetlights either. It was a terrifying place to cycle past. It was a mid-December night, and the snow was falling thick and fast. Absolutely freezing, I pedaled my bike as fast as possible from the station to my house in the pitch blackness. I had nothing but my bike light to guide my path. As I neared the abandoned apartment, I stopped pedaling. There was a single light shining from the top of the building. I gulped. Was it a ghost? The soul of someone who had committed suicide? I didn't want to go near the building, but this was the only path that I could take to get back to my house. If I wanted to take a different route, it would require me to head all the way back to the station. The whole journey would take me an extra hour. It was freezing cold, and as another gust of snowy air hit me in the face, I made my mind up and pedaled slowly towards the apartment. As I came closer to the building, I realized that the light was not that of a ghost or soul, but was obviously a torch or a lamp. I suppose it could have also been the light off of someone's phone. Sighing in relief, I was about to cycle past when I heard a bone-chilling scream. It was a woman. The screaming continued until there was a resounding thud, as if something had slammed onto the pavement. A fresh gust of cold air erupted all around me. A woman had just thrown herself off the building. At first, I was frozen in fear, but it didn't take me long to spring into action. I rushed over to the foot of the building and found the girl who had jumped, gasping for breath and shaking in agony. Her limbs were shattered and contorted, and claret seeped from her mouth as she looked up at me, pure terror in her eyes. The blood-stained snow around her cushioned her landing, so the fall hadn't killed her instantly like she planned. Instantly, I pulled out my phone and called for help. I thought it was futile at the time. This girl was going to die in the next few minutes without proper medical assistance. All the same, I told her that everything was going to be okay and to just hold on a little longer. At least she wouldn't die alone. It wasn't long until the whole area was full of red, blue and white light. The girl was in a critical state, but unlike all of those that had jumped before her, she actually managed to survive. This whole ordeal was easily the scariest moment of my entire life, but not because of the girl, and not because I was so sure she was going to die. You see, as I knelt by the girl's side, freezing in the snow, waiting for the ambulance to arrive, I realized that she wasn't staring up at me, but was looking just past me, up at the apartment building. Several of the apartment's lights were now on. In the windows were people staring down at us. The complex seemed to be filled with light, sound and movement just before the ambulance arrived. Both she and I saw them, their bloody, emaciated faces inviting her in. The building's gone now, but I still take a different route home from work. This is a story from when I was in 4th year in primary school. It was nearing Christmas time and the winter holidays. I was a transfer student and had only just moved to the school a couple of months prior. Due to my father's job, my family and I were forced to move from Tokyo to a remote school near Sendai. It took a while to get used to, particularly because the accents the other kids had was so different from my city Japanese. There were times I couldn't understand a word they were saying. At the start, I ended up annoying a few people, including a teacher. I felt like I was a foreigner in my own country. 3 months passed, and I was finally getting used to the culture and accents here up north. I'd also made a small group of friends in my class. First, there was the jolly and outgoing Kane. He was the first one to talk to me. We ended up becoming very close. Then there was the dude in the leader position of the class, Jin. He also happened to be the class representative. He helped me out a lot, introducing me to the area and to the kids from the other classes in our year. Then there were Masahiro, Saburo, Tori, and Ayami, all of whom I'd met in class through various activities. Masahiro was best friends with Jin, and was really good at sport, which obviously made him popular with the girls. It's kind of interesting, but up to a certain age, all girls seem to look for in a guy is how athletic he is, regardless of looks or intelligence. But hey, that's just my observation. Masahiro used to always be with Tori, so I guess maybe they were dating at the time. Tori was a shy girl with pigtails. She was really nice. Her parents owned a restaurant, which I was told my friends visit every now and again. Honestly, I didn't know much about Saburo. He was quite the mysterious character. He'd generally not say a word in class, and would only look happy when he heard the bell for lunch. So that leaves just one of my friends who I haven't talked about yet. Ayame. Sweet, sweet Ayame. I fell in love the moment I set eyes on her. When I first met the class, she offered to let me sit at the empty desk next to hers. I was anxious, so all I could do was say thanks timidly. But she just smiled, took my hand and said, "Don't be nervous. My name's Ayame. It's nice to meet you. I hope we can be great friends." That had been enough for me to fall for her. So like I said, it was nearing the end of term. We were only a week away from the winter holidays, and it was snowing heavily outside. Naturally, everyone at school was super excited. But it was at this festive time that one kid in our class played a truly messed up prank, if you can even call it a prank. They had decided to empty the entire contents of the fishbowl in the back of our classroom, remove the goldfish from inside, and experimented with freezing them in the snow outside. Mr. Ito, one of our teachers, had found the poor things, frozen and dead, just outside the school entrance in the morning. "Who's responsible for this?" he asked angrily. Now, Mr. Ito was generally a nice guy, but he had gone through a lot of effort to take care of those fish. You could tell from the expression on his face that he was in no mood to play games. The whole class erupted in chatter. Accusations and conspiracy theories started flying around. Did you do it? No, of course not. Did you see who did it? Who could have done such a thing? It was obvious that the culprit was from our class. The school was having a winter sports day in the hall before the holidays started. Jin had needed to get special permission from the school for the class to practice in the sports hall so we could beat the other classes. Therefore, we were the only students in the school that evening. The teacher had checked the class before he left, and the fish had been fine then. Next morning, they were frozen stiff. "I'm going to ask you one more time," snapped Mr. Ito. "Do any of you kids know who the culprit is?" Silence. Everybody just stared down at their tables and waited for someone to fess up, but no one did. If anyone was found to be guilty of this, it would put a permanent black mark against their name and ruin their chances of getting into one of the better secondary schools. That in turn would ruin their chances of getting into a good university, and as a result, a good job. The Japanese system's kind of screwed like that, but it's just how things work. The atmosphere was as glum as that of a funeral. Even though I knew the culprit wasn't me, I still felt nervous. The silence of the class seemed to annoy the teacher even more. "Okay, that's fine. I want you all to close your eyes. If any of you know who the culprit is, or if the culprit wants to admit to their crimes anonymously, raise your hand or point to who did it. No one's leaving this classroom until I find out who's responsible." This was terrible. The teacher wasn't in his right mind. He shouted again to the class to close their eyes. We all took one last quick glance around the classroom to check where everyone was sitting, and then complete darkness. As I lost my vision, my hearing seemed to become more sensitive. The sound of the ticking clock, the sound of breathing, the rustling of paper as someone moved, a cough. Had someone admitted to their crime? Had someone snitched? I couldn't take the pressure, and I opened my eyes thinly to look at the class around me. There was Silly and Jolly Kane, the class leader, Jin, Masahiro, Saburo, Tori, and Ayame. Sweet, sweet Ayame. All of them had their eyes closed, and all of them were pointing at me, along with quite a few other class members I didn't even know. Completely silent, like statues, in unison, they were all sticking out their fingers in my direction. I gulped. My teacher's footsteps resounded on the wooden floor as he slowly walked towards me. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, who doesn't love a few good 2chan stories to get you in that holiday spirit, am I right? Special thanks to my friend Phantasmal Wretched for translating these stories from Japanese into English. Make sure to check out his channel for some more spooky content. He specializes in translated horror stories, so you're bound to find something unique if nothing else. As always, be sure to smash that like button or I'll smash you. And I'll be back with some more videos for you guys very, very soon. Until then, Lazy Legion, you all stay spooky. And remember, The best things happen in the dark.